Good morning or day or evening, everybody. And this is Vladimir Acuna, and I have an amazing, amazing new time, nearly New York Times bestselling author, Sherry Dunn, and she has launched her amazing children's book. I'm going to show you this way. She's going to show it to you as well. Maddie and Jasmine, and it's such a phenomenal book. Sherry is an author. She's an animal advocate, and she has used to work as a human resources, but it's full of passion for children, for reading, for animals. She loves, I'm going to have a look at this, watercoloring as well, which was like, wow, I didn't know that. I know she plays piano as well, but she's mostly a woman who is extremely positive, disciplined. She's one of those who grew up in a positivity. That's why we use her as an example of like amazing growing up environment, and her passion and dedication to others is really inspiring to me. And I've invited Sherry to obviously talk about her amazing book. And hi, Sherry, welcome.
Hi, Vladdy. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you.
This is exciting.
It is. I'm going to start Maddie and Jasmine. Jasmine is a cat, and it's going to be a very famous cat, and we already see it in our minds as a famous cat. But tell us a story. What actually brought you to writing the book?
Well, I during 2020, which was kind of a down year for everybody, but you make lemonade out of lemons, and I had 3 cats. They were old cats. They all died one by one, but they were 20. One was 20, one was 18, and my last one was 18 and a half. And she died right in the middle of 2020. And nobody could go out. They couldn't really do anything. And when she died, that was not only very sad for me, but I was used to having cats around the house. I support a lot of animal shelters in the area. I called up Andrea, who was the head of the cat division of the one shelter, and I told her that my last cat had died. Remy had died. But I said, I need another cat. And I always like the older pets because their road to adoption is very long. And most people, if you had a choice of an older cat or even a dog, but we're talking cats right now, an older cat or a kitten, most people go toward the kitten. So I went out to the shelter. She said, I've got just the cat for you. So I went out to the shelter. She had a cat that she called Jasmine. They all have names, but she had a cat. She's a tortie. And a tortie is a cat that looks like a tortoise shell. They're usually dark with rust and lighter colors, tan running through. She had this cat. She had been at the shelter for 3 years. Now, that is an awfully long time. One day is a long time for an animal to be in a shelter, but she was there for 3 years. She showed me some other cats, but I chose this one. My story, even though I'm not Maddie, the story kind of intertwines with reality because I looked at several other cats and I chose Jasmine. I took Jasmine home, the best day of my life, because during 2020, while other people were watching TV and doing, things that entertained them, I decided to write a book, and I wanted to write a children's book. I'd always wanted to write a children's book. I wrote about my cat. I wrote about the cat and her first days here and everything. A friend of mine who is a writing coach, I called her up and I said, hey, I've got a story about a cat, a shelter cat, and I just adopted her. Would you please read it? Because she's a writing coach. I said, would you please read it and tell me what you think? She read the story. She said, this is a very good narrative, but it's not a children's book. And I was kind of shocked because I thought it was. She told me about the industry standards for children's books and how they should be written, because I wanted to write a children's book, but I wanted to write it according to all the correct standards and so that a child would learn from it. Because I'm not only an animal rescue advocate, but I'm also a children's literacy advocate. It's very important to me, and I can tell you a story about that shortly. So that's what got me started. And that was 1.5 years ago. And I've been with this writing coach ever since. Maddie and Jasmine, the book that was just published and is now on the international bestsellers list.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It had 15 edits. I edited this book 15 times. Wow. Until we really got it down to a concise. We not only edited, it was not only edited 15 times, but it was also broken up into 3 books. So this particular book is book number 1 in a series. And it's the story of 2 misfits, the cat and the little girl. And it starts out that way. And children's books have an arc. There's a problem that accelerates, and the child has to solve the problem, and it comes back down again. All 3 books have their own arc. And then when the 3rd book, all 3 have an arc. So it's one big arc, and it's a big story about them. But I wanted children to learn. I wanted them to learn about animal advocacy, because what children learn when they're young, they carry with them. And children need to know, sometimes, they always say children don't really know where their food comes from. They don't know it comes from a farm and this and that and the other. And I wanted them to learn that this is what animal shelters and animal adoption is all about, and kindness, being kind to animals. And a quick story about children's literacy, which is very important to me. I always thought I could read. I can't remember when I couldn't read, but there must have been a day. When I worked for the federal government in human resources, and I worked for the Department of Navy, we were in a community, and there was an elementary education school in the community. And we were asked if we could partner with them and help, and help the children out in elementary school. I said, sign me up. What do we do? And they said to help children that are having reading difficulties, to help them over the hump and help them learn to read better. Well, I said, well, now I'm really in. They signed me to a little boy. The little boy had reading difficulties. He was slow. It was hard to pronounce words. And I was to meet him at 12 o'clock when he was at lunch. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, is this child really going to want to break up his day in school to have me teach him or work with me on how to read? So I said, I'm going anyway. And I went, because that was what I signed up to do. I went to the principal's office. She took me down to the cafeteria, and I was full of kids. And they're all being loud and noisy and being kids, at lunchtime. And she said, I'll point out so-and-so to you. And I said, never mind, you don't have to. I know exactly who he is. And there was this little boy sitting on the end of the bench of one of the cafeteria tables, with his little feet up on the bench and his chin on his knees and a backpack on, looking at the door, waiting for me.
Oh.
And I thought at that time, I don't care whether or not they have to wheel me in a wheelchair or carry me in on a stretcher. This child wants to learn. He wants to learn to read. And I kept my end of the bargain, and he did too, because at the end of his school year, he could read right along with the rest of the kids. So as a gift, I gave him a book.
I love the story. It's such a great example of, you said 3 things that really stood out for me. First, especially in COVID, we could actually see this, where people could actually choose to grow. And, I actually started writing my book in the COVID, and people say, when do you have time? You find time for things that matter and that really, really show that passion and the desire to help and serve. And there are so many ways, especially kids. I love you chose children's book. And I feel that writing a children's book is so enriching on so many more levels, because it's just for all the reasons you just named. It's a giving something that makes the world a better place. And this is a great example of how we sometimes assume that kids don't want to learn, but they just maybe not interested in a way we present it to them. Because it's actually, sometimes they just, oh, it's a fear as well. And he knew, the little boy knew, that if he can read, he can actually bond with more children. You know, like they're very smart, and you should mention that as well. I love the story about the shelters, because actually that's another thing happened in the COVID, like especially in the area where I live. I know that after the COVID, the shelters were packed because people got pets, a lot of pets, while they were working from home, and then everything returned to supposedly called normal, but people went back to work, and then the animal is not just something that fills your days when something happened and we were here. But so many parents, I'm going to say, actually gave a wrong message to a child by going, oh, we have to go back to work, we can't look after them. And what you actually showing in the story is the relationship. And it's proven these days that even in elderly homes in here, actually, we have a horse from a local farm that comes and visits these elderly people, because the animal's energy apparently really helps. They can feel and they can help people. Because sometimes people just prefer to have a pet, not in a way that they don't like people, but in a way of they feel understanding. They feel that they're talking. It's almost like they
There's
feel
no judgment.
Yes, no judgment. That's so true. That is actually really the best way to put it. Thank you. That is it. They feel safe. They feel the space is safe to tell something to. And as we all know, is when we release this energy, we feel good, right? And yes, that is exactly. We are worried that if we tell other people, they judge us because they don't understand, or they look at it from the point of view where they stand, which may have a limited understanding. But the book is so fabulous. I love the illustrations. My little girl went over them. They're fantastic. They're very powerful expressions of Maddie's face. You learn, and the lessons you learn, you were so right when, you said there are so many books, and this is not being disrespectful in no way, in any old. No. But I do love, like as a mom, I am very, what's the word to use? I'm very careful what books I read, because sometimes I don't feel the book had any message and I donate the book. Nothing's wrong with them, but it's just, I really choose a strong message book for my kids. And that is like, you are showing a real understanding, and also knowledge, and also wisdom and expertise. Because when you were talking about what you're doing, this is what we need, people like you who have a deep understanding and expertise, because not every book is like the book, like you said, it has to have certain sort of standards, because that's how they learn. And they do understand, they're looking for the way how they work, and they can understand. What would you say? What would you encourage? I mean, what's your intention for the book? That's the first thing I'm going to ask.
Well, my intention for the book originally was to, I support several animal shelters in the area. To and including, there's a sanctuary here very close by that's Save the Chimps. And Save the Chimps happens to be a sanctuary of 12 islands that they're chimpanzees taken from medical facilities and stuff like that. And they've had a hard life, in a medical facility. NASA will shoot them up in the, in the space. But so I support a lot of animal shelters. And I thought this story, to me, this story was one that could be twofold. It could be for children's literature, and proceeds for this book will be available to animal shelters, to more animal shelters, so that we can make the world a better place for these companion animals. I was telling someone the other day that the animals that they can't be treated like they're worthless. The idea that or the thing you brought up about during the end of the pandemic, people said, oh, okay, we're done here, take the animal back. Animals have feelings, and a lot of these animals are in shelters through no fault of their own. I went to one of the shelters, and I go to a lot of their functions and things to help them raise money. they had a bonded pair. A bonded pair of animals, you know, shouldn't be split up. They know they've been with each other for too long. They're a pair of dachshunds. They were the cutest things. Now, they were 12 years old. They were at the shelter. The reason they were at their shelter is because their owner had died. They had a beautiful, wonderful home for 12 years. And all of a sudden, they go from a beautiful, wonderful, caring home to a shelter. Now, the family didn't want them, so they were given to a shelter. Now, the shelters do the best they can, but shelters are full. And when you've got 100 dogs, this one particular shelter, I mean, dogs are walked 3 times a day. So they've got a lot of volunteers to go out. But these animals, I mean, all they want is a forever home, you know? And the thing I liked about the illustrator was she's so good. And again, not taking away from any other illustrators. I just happen to be very fortunate to get Nino. Cannot pronounce Nino's last name. You might be better at that. But Nino, if you just look at the cover,
Yeah.
Pardon me, there's mowers outside. If you just look at the cover alone, the picture tells you that is nothing but a picture of love.
Love and kindness, absolutely. That's what actually popped into my mind straight away.
Mm-hmm. So and both of these are my passions. I mean, it's like, get out of my way. We're going to help the animals, abandoned animals, and we're certainly, by doing this and showing the compassion in a book, we're certainly going to help children become more literate. And one of the shelters that I also work with, they have, and I'm going to get involved in this heavily, but they have a group called Misty's Pals, P-A-L-S. And within that group, they have a group called Pause to Read. Pause, you know,
Yeah.
to read.
I love that.
And what these animals do is, and I know one personally because the owner is one of the vet technicians at my veterinarian. But what they do is they go work with children on reading. And they put them in a room, the child and the dog usually, and they sit there. Cat'll do it too, but dogs are a little more peaceful. But they sit them in a room with the child, and the child reads with no judgment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not somebody saying, oh, no, you got that word wrong. The child reads the thing. They will learn the word eventually.
Yeah.
But with working with a pet, they just read it. Reading is a pleasure to them. It's not a chore.
I love what you said, because when you think about it, when they're born or when they're little, they choose to use their teddies, right? They line up their teddies and all the soft toys and read to them. At least my kids always did that. They pretended they're teachers and they're speaking, and that is something that then grows into a pet, and they can really become confident because, like you say, when there's no judgment, what happens to us adults, we tend to, whether we're teachers or parents, we tend to correct them, right? So when they
Correct.
read, and whereas this way, like you said, and it's about the way they actually go through it. You know, they will study the words, and they do look at the pictures, and they can feel. So even looking at the pictures and reading through the stories, I really love the illustrations because they're really so real. I mean, every face you look at before you read, you kind of can predict what's going on in Maddie's little heart, like being said. I mean, I was just looking at the page 11, where I don't know if people can see this, where Maddie said, because the boys are laughing at her, and you can kind of, in your mind, the child knows where it is when they're reading as well. It kind of gives them indications, so they can combine that with the feeling of reading.
Right.
And it's just beautiful. It's really beautiful book.
If you look at page 9, page 8 and 9,
yeah.
When I first got the illustrations of this, I looked at that, and all you want to do is hug that child.
Yes, you do. She looks so sad. It's so true.
But yet, when you look at this, and you could say to a child, what do you think happens in this book?
Yeah.
It brings up reading for children. Books teach children about the future, about what they're going to look forward to. They answer questions, or they answer questions, and they stimulate questions from the child.
Definitely stimulating. It is beautiful. You know, it got me like, who would you say? I mean, this is for every child, and I really highly recommend everyone to buy this book because it's so powerful. It really is so truly powerful. Who did you become in the process of becoming an author?
Well, in the process, I knew that I knew I had a passion for reading. I have a 17 by 12-foot library in my living area, and this my office is full of books. I knew I had a passion for that, and I knew I had a passion for animal welfare, but I didn't know that you could take this kind of a passion. I didn't know. I knew that's what I loved. I didn't know it was my passion. And it was like I worked for 3 different areas. I had 3 different careers. And when I started doing this, when I started writing this and finished it, I mean, it was like one day I said to myself, and I live by myself, so I said it to the cat, I said it to Jasmine, I have a passion. What a difference it makes when you figure it out for yourself. You know, someone can say, oh, you're passionate about that. And someone could answer, yes, I am. But when you feel it,
Oh yeah,
it's
a whole different story.
It's a whole different story. And
It's
you
like
know
the
you're
joy.
making a difference.
Yeah, it's the joy mixed with satisfaction and fulfillment, and it's like that. You know, it pretty much really describes when we start to loving ourselves, when we find that self-love and the self-worth, self-deserving, which actually books help children to do that because they build self-esteem by doing things, and then they confident. They don't just, pretend. This is a real foundation for them to grow and understand and actually learn to create and build relationships as well. And this book is really a great example for a relationship builder as well.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have, we have in this library, in this county, we have 7, I think 6 or 7 libraries. It's a small county. Every library is going to get a free book. Every animal shelter is going to get a free book. And I'm going to work with, I think it's House of Hope, these families that are broken up because of not so good circumstances. But any child in one of those is going to get a free book, because if you can read, I don't care if you're a billionaire or if you have 1 cent in your pocket. If you're given a book, or there's a place to get a book, like a library, something like that, you can go anywhere in this world, because you can do anything in this world. And that's the importance. That's why the children's literacy is so important to me, because that child that I helped read, my hope is, and maybe this will come true if I dig deep enough, I'm hoping that child is now the president of a company, and he looks back on that same day and feels as strongly about what we went through together as I do.
You know what's funny? When you were actually talking the story, it crossed my mind. I wanted to ask you, I forgot to actually ask you, are you in touch with this boy, or do you know his name or where he is? He might find you through actually one of these interviews, or you talking about the story, because I would want that. Like, I would want, if I was someone and you remember as a child and we went through things, each one of us, there are stories, each one of us has stories. And going back to, I remember 2 teachers. They were very strict, but very firm and great. And I remember them, and they helped us so much. Even years and years after, I would still go back and just help them and do anything, because those were just the moments where every child knows that if that didn't happen, where would I be?
Where would
And
I be?
we all have these amazing people, and I always say I wouldn't want to change anything in my life. I just love every part of it. Doesn't matter how challenging or amazing it is. But I know which points stand out and which parts were so powerfully really adding to where I am and who I am now. And that is such a great story when you were talking. And, you know, I can just see the boy finding you.
Well, his little, I mean, just to see his chin on his knees, you know, and he was, you know, how they kind of go like this, and he had this big backpack on, and these were his knees, and his, you know, his chin was just, he was just looking at the door, and he greeted me that way. Well, after he knew who I was, then every day that I would, you know, I would go work with him. I mean, he'd see me and he'd come running to the door, but just to see the difference, and I thought to myself, wow, all I remember is sitting on my great grandfather's armchair, you know, sitting there with my arm around his neck, and he'd be reading to me. But even as a small child, he came home from work one day, worked on the railroad, came home one day, and he said, would you like a playhouse? He was a man of few words. And I said, yes, I'd love a playhouse. And he made me a 2-room playhouse under a willow tree with a little front porch on it. It was two rooms, and in the first room I had all, you know, all little girly stuff that I never really used. But in the back room, in the second room, was my library. I had a library from kindergarten on up.
You know, I love that it somehow shows the long life path and passion, even if we discover it a bit later or at any stage of life, the passion's still kind of running you. I've spent so much time in the library. And my mom used to say you would just go there and stay there, because actually those days you wouldn't be able to just take all the books out because they didn't have that many. So when I was growing up, we actually had to go in there, stay there 2 hours, and keep the books in the library. We could photocopy some of the parts and just write. So I used to just write. I remember all the stuff I loved from the book, I just wrote. And it just reminded me, actually, I forgot about that. And
well, my grandmother was an author. She loved writing, and she would encourage me to write. As a little girl, we would write letters back and forth, and she always put a topic for me to write about in the letter, and I would write that story and send it back to her.
That's great. That is brilliant. You know, that's something that is really great for children, just writing as well, because that encourages them. That seeing that you wrote the story and they can write their story. And you were mentioned there are other 2 books. What are the, do you have a name of the other 2 books so people know what's coming?
I'm sorry, you broke up just a little bit.
Oh, sorry. You have 2 more books coming up. What are they called? They named?
Well, this one's called Maddie and Jasmine. Book 2 is Maddie and Jasmine Go Shopping. It's also teaching children what, you know, when you own a pet, what needs to happen. And the 3rd book is called Maddie and Jasmine Settle In. And that's when they really bond, and that's when I love book 3. I love book 3 because I'm supposed to be reading these books to children, because, you know, you read them story time. And I said, I don't know, I may have to have a reader do that book 3, because I get pretty emotional about it at the end, because it's just sweet. You know, it's just a sweet ending. And again, with both passions, and I've always had both, like you said, and I just discovered it all of a sudden, you know, 2020, I discovered what they really were. They just weren't things I did. But I had in my blog, I have a blog, it's sherrydunn.com. And I have a portion in there where if you have an adopted pet, and you write a story to me, there's guidelines in there what I need. If you write the story to me, once a month I select somebody and print their story, and then you tell me what your favorite animal shelter is, and I donate $100 to their favorite animal shelter. And this is a win-win-win for animals, for the people writing. I had an 11-year-old girl, she was 10, then she turned 11. She was a 10-year-old girl. She was my vet's daughter. And she wrote the first 3 months, she wrote stories, 3 stories. And what I did is I got together with her mom and we went to her school, the child's school, Caroline School. And her English teacher was so excited about this. I presented Caroline with a certificate of commendation that appreciation that she wrote these 3 books, and she was responsible for $300 going to shelters the first 3 months of 2022.
That is such a beautiful thing to do, and I absolutely love it. So children around the whole world can do that?
Yeah. They just need.
You guys go to Sherry Dunn. I will put all the information underneath so you can actually see. You go to Sherry's website. This is a great way to encourage your child. Read the book, see the message, and what is your story? What would you love to encourage your child? They can actually email. You can help the child to email it to Sherry. And this way they actually are learning to give as well. They feel proud. And I know how really impactful it is to include my children for all the stuff I ever donated. I'll create or raise money for charities because I'm involved with few, or, you know, like raising money for church or actually schools. And I always involve my kids. And I know that as we go through the journey, if they become part of it, that's who they become. They become someone who wants to give and help and find love and compassion. It's such a great way of actually creating this, what we were saying, everything we said, this actually is such a great thing to do. I love that, Sherry, really. And I encourage everyone to encourage their child to actually send the story to Sherry.
Well, what I need, there are a couple things. There are guidelines in there also. It has to come, I mean, their favorite shelter has to be a non-kill. Okay. We're trying to move toward no-kill shelters. I need the story of the adoption, you know, and life with your adopted pet. I need a picture of now children is hard. If I would get a picture of a child and thing, I would assume that the parent allowed me to post that. But I need a picture of the child, or maybe the back of a child playing.
Yeah, I wanted to say you can always use it backwards. I ask some of the parents to take a picture with my book, and they lying on the floor actually, so you can
right.
So yeah.
So I need the same thing, and then of course a picture of the pet.
That's right.
And
that's
it just
a great way to do this.
Well, it helps, you know, it helps again, it's what we keep saying. It helps children learn that animals are not just things. They have hearts, they have souls, if it weren't for animals, how many times are animals helping people? They help them all the time. They go, I mean, my mother, and this is another thing, and I'm going to expand. Jasmine's going to be not only a household name, but she's going to be a worldwide name. But with some of the things that I propose to do, and I'm going to do, my mother had dementia the last 4 of her years of her life. That's very childlike behavior. Mm-hmm. And what she had was always had a love of pets. She always had several. And I gave her a dog, little stuffed dog, and she loved it. And that's another thing that these books are good, believe it or not, to take to places like memory care, that sort of thing, because they love to hear stories like this also.
That's such a great way. And I love you mentioned it, because that was my next question. Like, everybody who hears the name Garfield probably knows who Garfield is. Well, I certainly do. And Jasmine is soon to be someone like Garfield.
Well,
will know.
Everybody's going to know. Yeah, everybody's going to know who Jasmine is. So remember her name. But she's also going to be, and I loved Garfield too. But Garfield gets a little he's a little bit sassy. And Jasmine is too in her Facebook, because she's on my Facebook page. But I want children especially, and adults to know this. I want Jasmine to be like the heroine. She's going to be the entity that children feel safe with. And I'm going to try to build that up, because again, it all goes back, I keep saying it, to the look of the cat on here. Would you want that cat?
Yes.
I know, right? I'm fortunate enough to actually have her. But that's what I want. I want children to feel this way.
Mhm.
I want them to look at that picture and say, that's me, and that's Jasmine helping me out.
You know, I just had a thought when you were talking about next time we have Jasmine sitting here instead of Sherry.
Yeah.
She will have to be next to Sherry all the time because she's this huge figure. And
Nobody knows who I am. They know who she is.
I love the way you're doing it because it really shows a grateful heart as well as true passion. And I know we're repeating this, but yes, true passion. And it's so much more fulfilling to do it if we're doing it almost for someone else. It's just like I love the way when you just making someone else famous and you just like the best coach pretty much on the person.
Well, I make her famous. I try to make her famous. And she's the one that, as I said, is on Facebook, and she has Jasmine here. That's her byline, Jasmine here. And then she usually talks about something silly that I'm doing. And then she usually talks about, you know, what celebration it is, pet celebration day it is. And then she usually talks about something that might be very important for you to know about your animal. So they're not long, but she's in charge of that. And I like to have some levity in there. So she's talking about something silly that I've done, stupid that I've done. And what life is like, when you're living with a pet, and can be so much fun. Because they require, cats sometimes have a bad reputation as far as, oh, you can get a cat and you don't have to do anything with it. Well, they require love and attention.
Yeah.
You just have to do it, that's all.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like children, pets, we all need the love and care. Plants, it doesn't even have to be anything living, just wants love and, you know, and care.
And I have a
And they
degree in
bloom, you know,
horticulture,
even
so.
flowers. If you don't look after the flowers, they're not going to be beautiful and blooming.
Well, that's what I mean. I have a degree in horticulture. That's my undergraduate degree in horticulture. So I've worked with plants for a long time.
Oh, wow. See, you're a natural environment creator.
Environmentalist.
I would say environment. If we create a happy and healthy and wealthy environment, then everything else is happy, healthy, and wealthy. So it's such a great part. What would you? How old is Jasmine now?
She is. I got her from the shelter when she was 7. So here's a timeline. She was 4 when she was surrendered to the shelter. She was at the shelter for 3 years. So I got her when she was 7, and I've had her for 3 years. So she's now 9.
9 years. 9 years old.
9 years old, yeah. And she's considered a senior. Pardon?
And becoming famous already.
And becoming famous already. And I think she knows it because you know, she's got me under control. Just when you think you're in charge, you're not. But she likes the notoriety, I think, even though I don't hold her up a lot, because she's a squirmy cat. But I have a beautiful, beautiful painting that I had done of Jasmine from an artist, a local artist. I mean, it's beautiful, looks just like her. And for book signings, I'm going to take the painting to and put it on a little easel on the book signing table. And then one of the raffles at one of my bigger book signings, one of the raffle tickets, the winner will win this artist painting their pet's portrait.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Because the artist does such a great job.
I've seen the picture. It's fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah.
She's really talented. Any final messages for our beautiful readers?
Well, not really. I mean, I'm proud of this book. I know that the readers will love this book. I've had people that I have a personal trainer that comes 3 days a week, and he's a big guy, and he loved this book. So it's just something that I believe you will love too. I've had children. You told me about well, your child hasn't read it yet. Yeah. She's looked at the pictures. But I gave the manuscript to a friend of mine who has a 10-year-old child that I believe is on the autism scale. think she's high end, but she's on the autism scale. And I said, see what she thinks about it. And I got the most beautiful reply from what this child said about the book, that actually I have some of the wording is in some of the things that I've put into my bio and that sort of thing.
I think that's so powerful. I find like when the children actually review the book and they telling you the ideas and they even coming up with something like, well, what you could have done. I had that with my son coming like, well, you know, when they were chasing them and he's given me a scene, which I thought, you know, like that's really interesting, where people should actually, children should read my second book before.
Read the manuscript.
Because it's just really good way of finding out what really they think. And that's so much more important from their perception. Like you said, actually, when you're writing a letter from Jasmine's point, it's like, how does the animal that is lost feel? And it shows the message to children from that perception, because it's easy to describe it from ours. But what if we actually pretend to be that animal and now just describe how happy we are to be looked after and to see people? And, you know, like they can see that differently as well, which is so important.
And it's fun. That's what the fun part of it is. Trying to be a cat. You know, she is I only have one now, her, because she was bullied as a cat in the house she came from. And when she was surrendered to the shelter, she had no fur. They had no idea what her color was because she was so stressed. So having her and coming from her point of view is interesting, because I have to now think like a cat, and I have to be, cats just have a little bit of an attitude, a catitude. So you have to kind of get a little edge in there. Like Garfield was really good. I want her to be kind of the counterpart of Garfield, but in a more gentle way, but getting the point across, because Jasmine is always talking about in her Facebook posts, she's always talking about the importance, not really in your face type thing, but just, oh, did you know? And then something like that. For instance, just the other day, I was posting something about the book. Jasmine was posting something about the book, and I said, it said in there, be careful. We're coming up with some holidays, and 4th of July for the United States, Canada Day, I believe, is today or something like that. And I said, and she said, have fun, but be careful, be mindful that the animals, sometimes fireworks and things are scary to animals, and be careful of where they are when you're having these festivities, because July is the biggest month for runaways and lost animals.
Yeah, I understand that, because if you have animals, you know that the dogs will be under the bed, and everybody's just not, because of the noise, and obviously they can feel.
Well, it's just startling. It's you're sitting there and all of a sudden a firecracker goes off behind you, and because of the runaways. But Jasmine mentions that in her Facebook page, and that's what she does. It's just kind of like, are you aware that? And then she moves on.
I love that. I love the way you're actually bringing all these messages out, and it's more comprehensible for kids. They can actually relate to it better when they hear it from Jasmine, because that's how kids just really understand situations more. And they tend to not, because we tell them all the time, we raise them, we help them to understand. So they almost become like sometimes building a glass wall, like, yeah, okay. Whereas when the animal's talking, they become more receptive. So that's another really great thing.
But thank you very much
Thank you so much, Sherry. It was an honor having you. Everybody, Sherry, would be love to hear from you. Obviously, if you could give her a review as well. It's very important for authors to actually get a review. If you love the book, or your child send her picture, or just write a review, because that is a really great way to say thank you to author. And just everything Sherry said, I will post all the stuff. If your child wants to write a letter, or if you adopted an animal and want to send her a story, please do. And the book is available on Amazon, so you can order it from in any country, I'm pretty sure.
Also on Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Nobles as well. And Sherry has links on her website as well, which will be under the video, so you can just go directly there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Have a beautiful day.